Hey, welcome back to the show. We're going to explore some more tones with the Boss Katana Head Mark II. And I'm just going to run some pedals through the front and through the effects loop, just see how things go. On the intro there, that was a really awesome solo by Old Drake from MkII, and that was the song Tomb. It was just a really emotional solo. I really enjoyed playing it. And I just thought I'd throw it in there as it's one of the tones that I was working on. I listened to MkII so much and I don't think they get half the recognition they deserve. They're a fantastic band, and if you haven't already, please check them out. They're just so good. But anyway, something I wanted to talk about when we're dialing all the tones for the Boss Katana is the output. And some of you have the Torpedo Captor X, some are just using the open back speaker and combos that they come in. Others have all different speakers, and they do sound dramatically different depending on what you actually use. So the presets that I've been making up, I've actually been doing to sound like the 1936V 212 here with the Celestian Vintage speakers. But today, just running through this, I'm actually using the mini Recto cab in the corner with a V30 inside, and there's an SM57 pushed up to it about, I don't know, about 1.5 inches or 2 inches off the dust cap. I just moved the SM57 just so it sounds good to me. You just keep moving it away from the cone till it doesn't sound too fizzy, but you don't want it too dark at the same time. And I've got that inside the ISO cab so that in the room it's just not loud at all. It's just a wooden box and it's filled with foam, and it pushes up to the speaker and just cancels out a lot of that massive room noise, so I'm not deafening anyone, not annoying the neighbours. So the guitar I'm using today is my 2012 Charvel, and it's just a really cool guitar. It's got AMG 8181. People say, why do you have 81 in the neck and the bridge? But honestly, I can't tell the difference between 81 or a 60 when it's in the neck position. To me, they just all sound the same, but an 81 on the bridge really shines for me. That's all I really care about. But it's a cool guitar. It's a workhorse. I've been using it for years, and I know the tone is there. But something I do want to talk about is the output for the Katana. Some of you have the 2 notes Torpedo Captor X that I usually use in the videos. Today I'm using the SM57 and the Recto cab. If you've got a Katana combo like the 50 watt with an open back speaker is just tender. They've got this notorious sort of woolly, darker tone to them. So if I've got a really bright sounding speaker that's closed back, they sound really focused. And if you try and run that through an open back speaker, they are going to sound a lot darker. They're going to sound like the microphone's moved away a long way from the cone. So I think we're just better off talking about the speakers and how you can manipulate your amp and how you can change it in the Tone Studio to get the same output sound that I'm getting. So even for me, speakers in the room just sound vastly different. So just running through, this is the Injustice for All preset that I used last week. Instead of the 1936V cabinet and using the Torpedo, we're using the Recto cab, which is a lot darker anyway, and this is the tone that we're getting. It's a lot darker tone, but I'll use a guitar that actually is tuned in for the same tone just so we can talk about it. That is a fair bit darker coming out of the Recto cab there, and to counter that, just so that you can all do this at home if you're finding the presets are a little bit dark or a little bit anything else. So I think if you're just going to tune these to yourself to suit your own setup, the best thing to do is just start with the effects palette where I've got the parametric EQ. I wouldn't go turning too many dials, but just in that high output there, just at the end. I think for this specific tone, I've got it about -2. If you just put that up to 0, that just might brighten things up a fair bit. And then I'd come back to the main fascia panel and I'd just whine or feed in a little tiny bit more treble or a little bit less mids or whatever you think that it needs. Just use those main dials just here, the bass, middle and treble. And by doing it that way, I don't think you'll change too much of the core tone of it. You're just going to change it enough just to suit the speaker that you've got going on. So I did exactly that just before making the video, and I've just fixed that high end on the parametric EQ, and I've just wound a little bit more into the treble here on the amp up to about 62 I think, or maybe 65. And now I'll just compare the two tones. And that brightens things up a fair bit, but that suits the record a little bit more, specific to each cab that you've got in your room and the actual air that's around it and just the different way that it works. I'd like to think that you get a little bit more life out of these presets that I'm dialing in so they can actually work for you. So back to the show, and a question I get all the time is, what pedals are the best value for money that you can go and buy just to manipulate the tone the most? And I would say without a doubt, the first one that I would get is the MkII 6-band, just running through the front end. And why I say this, I think a lot of the way that I dial in a metal tone isn't just by strumming chords and just finding the tone. A lot of it's got to do with the chugs, and it's almost like you got to envision like a drum kit, I suppose. And when you chug down on the chord, you've got to think, is that a snare, or is it a kick drum, is it a crash? And that's really the fine points that really tunes your ear to dial in metal tones. And this allows you to change the front end just to manipulate that tone that you're after. If you go ahead and boost all the mids, you can hear it's a very sort of harsh attack. You can hear the percussion in those notes. It's extremely aggressive, it's so mid-rich. And like that, it's sort of unusable for this specific tone I've got going on. For other tones, it really needs that just to give you that little edge and that dynamic for that harsh attack. But here I think this tone is just lacking like a little bit of low end, and it can have a little bit of that sizzle on top, but there's a few frequencies in there that we don't want. And you can hear then when I've scooped out the mids just in the front end there, it really just thickens up this tone, like it's taken those mids out and made it almost sound more like a mezza boogie for that. Like the kick drum sound more than a snare sound. It loses the body at the same time, but it also just changes the way that the amp feels. And that almost gives you like a recent Metallica sort of tone, I think, like a... Another pedal that I find is just really good and manipulates your tone perfectly is the EQ from Hell. And this thing's a maniac. It's a little bit harder to use than most pedals, but once you get your head around it, it's just really good value for money. Next thing that I would actually go for is an overdrive, and these work really well in front end of amp. Even though it's very similar and you can get similar tones out of the MkII 6-band, an overdrive just changes and pushes the gain just differently, and you can get a little bit more warmer tones and better for solos and things. Whereas the 6-band, it almost suits more rhythms and like a different sort of attack going on. And so with the overdrives, I really don't have a preference which one I like better. It's really what one is better for that specific amp. I really like the Boss SD1 in front of the Marshall DSL. I think it just tightens up the front end a lot more and just seems to suit it. Whereas I found the Wild overdrive just suits this amp a fair bit better. So there's a lot of ways to use the overdrives. And if you've already got a gain in the front end of the amp, the overdrive is actually just there to tighten things and focus a little bit more. If you want to use it for more of like a lead boost or something like that, I just feed in the gain a little bit more and take the tone back on the top. And then something else that's really cool is the Puppet Master EQ from Master Effects. I find the Puppet Master EQ can just sculpt and just give you such a cool bottom end and just take out that right amount of mids without leaving it sound hollow or thin. It's a really cool EQ. It doesn't just have to sound like Master of Puppets either. I think it does like a really good Exodus tone if you just thicken the front end. So there you have it, all the pedals just work really well through the amp. No matter how you've got all the presets and everything set up within the Katana and what overdrives and things you have in the front end, as soon as you just use your own pedals in the front, they react really well with it. The effects loop is really clean. I think on the 50-watt variant for the combo, it actually doesn't have an effects loop, but I would have said before I got one that that's a really important feature for an amp, but when you've got the Boss Tone Studio and you can just have all those things in the effects loop or however you set up your chain, it really doesn't matter too much. But the effects loop is a nice feature, especially when you want to use it live and take it out and gig and everything. You've got all these different pedals at your fingertips as well as your presets. It all works really clean, and I was just using the built-in noise gate within the amp then. We didn't actually turn on the Boss NS2 at all, so that's really cool. Hope you enjoyed the video. Actually, I won't see you next week. I've got to go away, but I'll be missing a week, but I'll see you the one after. And until then, take care. All the best. Bye.